Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and tie master Anne-Marie Young. This is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. And Anne-Marie, I have a little bit of exciting news today. I kind of gave you a heads up about it before we got started here, but something I've been talking about off and on here on the program for quite some time, based on, among other things, the subtitle of the show, Your Daily Dose of Happy. I am pleased to announce that the Your Daily Dose of Happy project has launched, and we are now officially live. No customers yet, but that's going to come. It just launched over the weekend, so we didn't have a whole lot of fanfare. I can't say that I was really expecting anything right out of the gate. But this is my opportunity to do something I've wanted to do pretty much for the last, really all the 12 years that I've been doing the show, but especially the last 5 or 6 years. I've been wanting listeners to have the experience you and I get, because every week we're doing these shows and we have our guests and they get the experience too. There's an energetic flow that happens here, and you don't really hear it when you listen to the podcast. You have to be part of the conversation to feel it. But I've long wanted to listen, right? Isn't it true?
Yeah, that's true.
But I've long wanted listeners to have it. Well, this new service is going to give people the opportunity to do that. So anyone who wants to check it out, just go to yourdailydoseofhappy.com and you can read all about it. And if you're interested, you can even try a free session, because we won't even charge you for the first session. You just get a chance to try it out. And it's really incredibly affordable too, that was one of my goals from the very beginning, to make it, no more expensive than a Starbucks coffee.
Well, congratulations. I know you.
Yeah. Now, I don't know what's
worked really hard.
Well, yeah. And my Filipinos, who are the ones who have been trained to be the positivity partners, they're all excited too. None of us know what's going to happen with this thing. We have no idea if this is going to succeed or fail, but it's exciting that it got this far. So, yeah.
Well done. Stuff. I'm excited to see how it works.
Me too. Yeah. So we do have a guest joining us today. Her name is Kristal DeSantis. And now, Anne-Marie, most of the time you and I have guests on who are coaches of various kinds. And I would say it's fair to say 75% of them coach women. Am I off on that? That's about right, isn't it? So
yeah.
So it's kind of unusual for us to have somebody coming on who coaches men, but that's exactly what Kristal does. And she coaches them in regard to relationships, which is one of our favorite topics. So this is going to be a fun conversation. This is going to be really good.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm definitely going to learn something.
So let's bring her in. Kristal, first of all, welcome to the program. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
We're excited to have you too. And we were just chatting with you before we got started. You're in Austin, Texas, in the midst of a cool spell. And for anyone who knows anything about Texas, that's really unusual. So they're actually getting to enjoy being outdoors in July and August. That's pretty damn cool. Literally.
It is. It really is. Yeah. I don't think so. Last year at this time, I want to say we had, already 30 days over 100 degrees.
Right.
And this year we haven't even broken it.
Is that right? Not even once?
Yeah. I think so.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. At least not while I've been here. I've been out of town a little bit, but yeah, it's been quite lovely.
So you brought the good weather with you. Well done.
Maybe.
Well, I'm going to guess that in some way you were probably traveling in regard to what you do, which is my very brief way of trying to tie in how you ended up doing it. Because to us, that's one of the most important and interesting things, the story behind the story, how the whole thing got started. So tell us how you got into this.
Yeah, so I got into it from a very personal place. I grew up in a house where, I love my parents. They are lovely humans, but they were not a good married couple. So when I was growing up, there was a lot of conflict. And, I just kind of was like, this is really this looks so painful for people to try to, be in relationships. I think I'm just going to give that whole thing a pass. So when I went out into the world, I just didn't date. I was just like, I don't date. That's not my thing. I don't date. And I didn't date for many, many, many years until my younger sister got married. And I don't know if you know anything about Asian culture. I'm half Asian. It's kind of like, it's fairly traditional in the way that, you're supposed to kind of start from the top and work your way down. Like the oldest sibling gets married and then the next one. So I'd kind of been jumped over. My younger sister got married, and I hadn't even had a boyfriend at that point, So I kind of was like, all right, well, let me try this dating thing out. Like, we'll try it. And so I tried dating, and I was like, this is terrible. I don't understand this. Like, what is this? So this boyfriend I had, it lasted a couple of months, and it just didn't work out. But it actually hit me really hard when it didn't work out, because I am somebody who, tends to think I'm pretty good at most things I put my mind to. Mm-hmm. And so I had thought, I guess that like one day I will just decide to be good at dating, and I guess I'll be good at dating. And I wasn't. So after that relationship failed, I was like, okay, I need to figure this out. So I started kind of, figuring out like how do people date? Like, what are relationships? And starting to get curious about that. And then I met my husband. And then I was like, oh, now I really have a reason to do this work. So then I ended up going to therapy. And the first therapist I went to was a marriage and family therapist. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't on purpose, but, the universe, stars aligned. And I was like, oh, wow, you can actually learn how to be good at relationships. And you can learn so much to the point that you can actually get a master's degree in this. I'm in.
Oh, you're in. Okay.
So long story long, that's how I ended up becoming a marriage and family therapist, and really, loving what I do. And the reason I focused on men is because, kind of like the two of you identified, there are a lot of women in the helping profession, counseling, coaching, therapy, and a lot of them all, just naturally gravitate towards helping other women. And so I just saw a gap in the field, and I wanted to focus on, the other half of the equation, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
I'm glad you did too, by the way.
That's.
And just as an aside, my ex-wife is a former marriage and family therapist. She has her master's in that as well. So I have some background with it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She didn't focus on men or women in relationships. She focused on substance abuse, but nevertheless, she still had the degree.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
cool.
I'm fascinated by your choice of focusing on men, largely because as a man who grew up during what I would consider to be a time of transition, roles have substantially changed from when I was very, very young. Mm-hmm. Massively changed, mm-hmm. particularly for men. Mm-hmm. And as one of the very confused men, I was very, very confused for years. I mean, I was one of the many who experienced firsthand just how much it can mess you up to go through that kind of thing. So I'm kind of curious about a couple things. One thing I'm curious about is, as you have been working with men, now, of course, you're working from a therapeutic viewpoint. So therapy has very specific goals that it's trying to attain. But even within that scope, even within that context, what have you found in terms of how men have either been successfully or failing to keep up with that massive change that has been happening for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Things
have changed very quickly.
Yeah. I think we have a bit of a lag here. So we have
it
to
just glitched. Lag. Will you repeat that?
No problem. I mean, basically, I was just laying out that's what the experience has been for the last X number of years, up to 50, 60 years. And I was asking what your take is on how men have either succeeded or failed to deal with that massive shift that's been going on.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason I wrote my book, is because I was seeing that things changed really, really quickly. And I think a lot of men have gotten lost in the shuffle of the way that relationships and gender roles and everything has changed. I saw some men be very successful in making the transition, and then a lot of other men just were really lost. And I really just thought that was kind of unfair. How can you get good at something if you don't know what the rules are? And the rules of dating and relationships between men and women have changed dramatically in a very short period of time. And so
you can know
this is
what the rules
really
are
what I
behind the game because you can't keep up with the rules. That's the problem.
Yeah. So, I really wanted, and this is something else, in order for a couple to be successful in therapy, there has to be some sense of equality in, both people working towards the same goal with the same resources. And I found that there just weren't the same amount of resources available to men that there were to women who wanted to improve their relationship skills, or their self-awareness, or just working on being a healthy version of themselves. Again, a lot of the resources in the self-help, psychology, relationship field were directed towards women. So once again, I was seeing that there were men who were hesitant to come into therapy because they're like, well, I'm just going to get ganged up on. And then even if they were motivated, I didn't have the same amount of resources that I could give the motivated man who wanted to work on himself and work on his relationship. And so that's where I was like, well, that's just not, I'm a feminist, and to me that means equality. So I'm like, well, if the men don't have the same resources to be as good at relationships as they want to be, then we need to, there's a gap that needs to be filled. So.
Which makes sense. Yeah. So I'm glad that you decided you wanted to fill that gap. Now, you mentioned your book, which is called Strong, in big capital letters. So, I mean, there's a message coming through there. And then the subtitle, A Relationship Guide for the Modern Man. So tell us about how that title came about.
Yes.
Whoop, can you hear me?
Oh, I think I froze. I heard you introduce my book.
Yes, I was asking you to talk about how the title came about.
Okay, hold on.
Can you hear me at all?
Here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you. Can you hear us? You can't hear anything?
Kind of.
I can't.
I can, but it's pretty glitchy.
Try leaving the studio and coming back. In other words, quit your browser and come back.
I'll be right back.
All right. Yeah, we wouldn't have a show without technical issues, right? I mean, that's just
part
of the.
It's what happened to me last week. I couldn't get on, so
at all. I mean, you weren't even here. I mean,
of course, I know we had no internet at all. But I find this book thing quite interesting, this subject, because I do think it's really confusing for men at the moment. I think women want equality, but they also want chivalry, and they also want, it's very confusing. I watch stuff and think, well, what's a gentleman supposed to do nowadays?
It does get confusing, and it's actually less confusing than it was, say in the 80s and 90s. And they talk about confusion. That was massive confusion. By comparison, this is relatively easy, and there's nothing easy about this.
No.
Then it's like, well, someone please explain to me what's going on. That's what it was like being in the 80s and 90s. So, okay, Kristal, are you back? Can you hear us?
I can.
You can.
It's still a little glitchy, but I think it's better. It's
okay.
A little bit better.
As long as you can hear what we're saying and we can hear what you're saying, that's the main thing. All right. So let's try once more. Let's talk about the book title. How did that title come about? Where did you pick the word strong from?
So when I was starting my therapy practice, a lot of people, a lot of therapists, they have it be their name, right? It's like just Kristal DeSantis therapy or something like that, right? But I knew I really wanted to focus on men's issues. And I wanted to also, I have a passion for working with veterans and first responders. So I wanted a name that really kind of emphasized that going to therapy is a strength forward approach. So I wanted to not name it, I don't know, not to knock, but like Healing Waters or just my own name, or like, I wanted it to be more of a masculine type name, I guess. And so I was thinking about these different names. And then also at the same time, I was developing my model of, I'm kind of an eclectic therapist. I have trauma training, I have sex therapy training, I have attachment training, I have these different modalities that I'm trained in. So I wanted to create my own model, and this is where the name came from, is kind of the blend of these two things. I wanted a name for my practice that represented strength, and that going to therapy is about improving your life and improving yourself. It's like a really brave thing to do. And then on the other hand, I wanted something to, ground my model in. So STRONG is an acronym. I love acronyms. And it just so happens that it becomes it's the 6 pillars of a healthy relationship. Because again, I was like, for doing healthy relationships, like, what is that? Like, what are the rules? Who gets to decide? And then again, as I was thinking about this kind of health, like strength forward approach, I was like, well, strong is healthy. So let me think about the word strong, and let me think about acronyms. And it just so happened that it's like, again, the universe was like, here you go, here's this gift. So STRONG is the acronym of the 6 pillars of the essential elements of a healthy relationship. Okay. So if your relationship is strong, it's healthy.
Can you name what those 6 pillars are?
Yeah, absolutely. So in order for a relationship to be healthy, there has to be safety. That's the S. There has to be trust, T. There has to be respect, R. And then openness, there has to be openness, right? N, there has to be nurturing. And then G, there has to be generosity. So these are kind of the essential elements. And the way also it kind of divided was that the STR, the safety, trust, and respect, are the basics of relationship survival, right? So like if your relationship doesn't have safety, doesn't have trust, doesn't have respect, it's not even like, its baseline is not even healthy. I mean, if anything, it's probably toxic if it doesn't have those 3 things. But then once you get those 3 essential elements of health under your belt, it's kind of like, with your physical health, you got to have a baseline. And then once you have a baseline, then you can start working on like, what are some like reach goals, right? And so then that's where we go to thriving, and the openness, nurturing, and generosity. You can do that to help your relationship thrive, but you have to start with the foundation, which is that safety, trust, and respect. So yeah, it works in my brain. It works with the research. And it also, I find it works with masculine brains as well, they kind of want a plan. They want a guide of like, how does it make sense? Give me some steps to follow. And so it's, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I know that's what I was looking for, a manual that didn't exist. You create basically a manual. That's
what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And we're not easy creatures to understand, are we?
Yeah.
It's always a challenge, no matter how you look at it.
Definitely.
Relationships are going to be a challenge for everybody. But I love that you are focusing on the male side of it, because the thing that I find to be most challenging now, I'm back in the dating pool after a 23-year marriage. So that was a bit of a shock all by itself. But on top of that, I find that a lot of the old issues haven't gone away. They're still there. Some of them are actually more exacerbated than they used to be. I mean, some of them have actually been turned into, I don't know what to call them, fields of endeavor. I mean, one of the things that shocked me the most was when I learned just how big the pickup industry is, in terms of what is presented to men online. And I thought to myself, really? That's where we're at today? I mean, I had no idea. I was in a marriage. How would I know? But yeah, apparently it's a really big thing. And I don't think, I mean, I've been interacting with some of the men who are in the midst of that. I don't think they fully grasp what it is they're in the midst of. I don't think they realize what the long-term consequences of it are. It's just not even part of their programming.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I also wanted to make really clear is, you know, being a good person is not the same as being good at relationship skills. Because this is also something I saw a lot with men where they're like, I'm a good person. Why am I not getting, like, why are women not, you know, battering down my door? It's like, well, you can be a amazing human being and a good person and not have any skills to be successful in relationships.
Yes.
And so that's something I also wanted to really validate is like, you know, you're a great person individually, but being in a partnership, and I would say the same thing for women as well, but that's not really my focus area, is, you know, being a good person on your own is, you know, is great. Like, be a good person in society, be a good person on your own, be a healthy person. But then the skills to then do that in a relationship, that's next level. And a lot of people don't quite realize that, like, you know, that's when they say relationships are hard. Yeah, because you don't get to just show up and be like, I'm a good person, accept me. You know, it's like, okay, you know, there have to be some communication skills, some collaboration skills, you know, just a lot, conflict resolution skills, you know, all of it. Like, it's a whole other package, you know?
So if we were to find a way to, I mean, you described what you're talking about as a model. So if we were going to try to model what a healthy relationship is, particularly from the male perspective, how would you describe that?
So, you know, I think, I mean, the model is, I guess what I really want to always emphasize is, like, these are skills that you can get good at. And people in strong relationships are constantly working on improving and refining their relational skills, right? Where it's not one and done. I mean, that's the struggle about being in a relationship is, you know, it's a living thing and it's not something that you can just check boxes off. It's something that you really have to commit to. And one of the things I do often, I mean, so the first part of safety, and so safety is a big word, right? And so I break it down to these, like, really 4 essential elements. Because also that's something I saw as a difference between men and women is men often started with, I want respect in relationship. And women always started with, I want to feel safe, right? And so as a man, if you're looking to attract women, presenting yourself as a safe individual is also, like, again, from a woman's perspective, it's not just necessarily showing up as the nice guy, right? Because then I hear that also on the, you know, online with men where they're like, well, I'm so confused. Women say they want a safe, nice guy, and then they don't want that. They want the bad boy. And it's like, wait, hold on. Healthy safe, right? First of all, healthy women. Not every woman is by default healthy, right? There are women that are going to chase bad boys because they're not healthy.
That's right.
Yeah.
But that safety piece is, you know, it's so crucial to women, in that women will never trust or respect a man they do not feel safe with. They might be in a relationship with them, you know, if they're not healthy, but that kind of, like, if you're looking for a healthy relationship, being a safe man, which again, I also kind of want to validate that a lot of men, they want to be the protector, right? They're in their masculine. They're like, I want my wife to feel safe with me. Why doesn't she feel safe with me? It's like, well, let's break it down. You know, like, maybe she can't rely on you, right? If you don't know, or maybe you have some behaviors or some bad habits that are making her feel unsafe. For example, like, you maybe have an alcohol problem. And when you drink and you get angry and you start, you know, throwing things or punching walls, she gets scared, you know, so handle that, right? And again, there might be a lot of reasons why you drink. You're stressed, you've got unprocessed trauma. Like, you know, I understand there's lots of reasons. And your wife doesn't feel safe around you when you're like that. You know, if you've got a temper problem, Or if you got a secret gambling problem and your wife is always having to check up on the finances because you can't trust that, you're keeping the family safe, Same thing with porn use or affairs. If you are the unsafe element in your family, it's going to be really hard to, be the protector if you're the threat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, that's a major point for many men to have to face up to. It's true.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that gives it away a lot because they don't necessarily recognize it.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's again where I always want to encourage. It's like, it doesn't mean you're a bad person at all, but maybe there are some blind spots that you haven't ever sat down to look at. And once you do, then maybe you can figure out like, what do you want to do about them? Right. Because the other thing is, again, like with social conditioning and all these messages, it's interesting. Like the message for women is kind of like, you don't have to be in a relationship, right? Like a woman who chooses not to be in a relationship is empowered, or taking time for herself or dating herself. And then with men, still sometimes the message is like, get a woman, get a woman, get a woman, get a woman. If you're not, if you're a virgin, if you're single, like you're a loser in some way. And that's just, again, so I always, being in relationships is a huge commitment, and you don't have to be in a relationship until you're ready to be in one, and that's, again, like, learn to date yourself, give yourself a chance to, fulfill your dreams. If you want to focus on your career, focus on your career. Like, be intentional about when you want to get into a relationship, because nothing is worse than being in a relationship and then have your partner kind of have to drag you along, that dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
let's not do that anymore.
No.
Yeah.
And yet it's fairly common.
No, exactly. But really nobody's happy in that dynamic, right? The woman is like, why can't he just take initiative? And the guy's like, I've like told her no tons of times, and I feel like I just have to keep going. It's like, no, this is not healthy, So
that's probably the biggest challenge, I think, is identifying what healthy is. That's why I asked my question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's just for men either. I think it's both for men and women, trying to even understand and define what healthy is. Because very, very few people, this kind of surprised me. I didn't realize this until I was well into my adult years. Very few people actually grew up in healthy families. I was kind of shocked how many people don't grow up in healthy families. And yet it's what they know. And so on some level, people kind of conclude, well, that is what's healthy because that's what I experienced.
Or they know it's not healthy, but they don't know what to do to not fall into that same trap.
Sure. Yeah, that's the other possibility.
Right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But either way, they're still stuck with, well, I don't know what healthy is.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Walt.
So how do you navigate that? I mean, that alone, I mean, even if you put aside all of the changing gender roles and so forth, that point alone is going to trip a bunch of people up. Throw in changing gender roles, now you've just really thrown in the confusion. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah. I think the thing that I always emphasize is, so starting with that self-awareness of what is it that you are looking for. Like, don't worry so much about, I guess what everybody else is saying about what you should look for, or what you should want in a partner. And actually, Walt, I saw your Date Me page.
Oh,
that
was an experiment, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, but really, that's often what I encourage people to do is like, just sit down and think about it, right? It's like, throw away what you're supposed to want or what other people say, or who's going to make your family happy or whatever. But sit down and think about, like, what would healthy feel like for you, right? And often, again, these essential elements are there. I feel safe. I can be myself. I can talk with my partner. I feel that we trust each other. We don't have to be worried that one of us is, secretly stepping out in whatever way. It's like, if we mess up, we're invested in repairing the mess up, right? We trust that we have each other's back. There's mutual respect. We might not always agree on everything, right? And that's something else. Is like, I'm allowed to be my own person, and my partner and I, we navigate and we respect each other's differences. We don't have to have like, group think, couple blob. There's mutual respect, and so kind of these things, regardless of, what it looks like on the outside, if you're a working parent, a stay-at-home parent, you have a job, you don't, you're whatever, just these kind of essential elements underneath there is like, I feel safe to be myself, to be honest. I trust that my partner and I have the same goals, and we also have each other's back. And if we ever mess up, we'll own up to it because it's safe to do so. We respect each other's differences, and then, we stay open about any changes, because the person that we are at 20 is not going to be the person that we are in 20 years, and we stay open and invested in making sure that our relationship stays nurtured, right? We don't put it on autopilot. We continue to nurture our connection. We nurture, if we have a family, we're both invested in the nurturing and development of our children. And then we are generous. And that's that kind of, what I like to call like the fairy dust of I look for ways to make my partner's day a little bit better. Right. And I feel the same reciprocity. It's like, I didn't have to stop and get this, thing. I didn't have to send this text, but I did because, I'm just operating from that place of generosity.
Yeah, let's talk more about that nurturing side, because I don't think it gets the attention that it deserves. I do get the impression that it is actually valued by more couples today than, say, 50 years ago. I think there's a significant improvement there. And yet, even with that improvement, I think it's also fair to say that it's still pretty vague in a lot of people's minds. So let's dive into that a little bit. What does a healthy relationship look from your perspective, for instance?
Yeah, when it comes to nurturing, and that was actually my favorite chapter to research because of, this idea that, it's got so much in there. Because of the idea that like women are natural nurturers and men really aren't, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of the stereotype. Sometimes the stereotype. Yeah. But it's really interesting because for many, many generations, men, again, like if we go back in time, men were integral parts of their communities, integral parts of their family dynamics. Sure. And men were very involved in child rearing, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, if you had a family farm, it wasn't like dad couldn't just go out and, like there were lots of kids everywhere. Dad was very involved. And so really kind of going back to that of like, this idea that men are not wired to be nurturing, it really is a fairly modern message. And it really started after the Industrial Revolution, where companies and industries needed men to leave the home and go work in factories. And so that's really when the rise of the messaging happened, that a woman's place is in the home, a man's place is to bring home a paycheck. And so really that kind of separation, because from a long time before that, I mean, family units were units. Everybody pulled their weight. Everybody had to help, the kids learn, people survive, apprenticeships, right? Men, if they were a cobbler, they would bring their kids along and be like, hey, we're learning this skill. Right. So really that nurturing has been an integral part of fatherhood for generations until there was another message that then kind of got put out there.
So you're kind of suggesting really that it's not all that difficult to get back to it because the history is there. We just have to reconnect with that history.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
so if we're reconnecting with that history, then it also means that we're reconnecting with the society as a whole. Because to me, that if I had one word to describe, and I hate to say define, but let's just say describe, to describe the 21st century, there are lots of words I could pick, but one of the words I think is disconnected. Mm-hmm. Is this massive.
Oh, you've muted, Walt.
See, I disconnected from the microphone. I disconnected immediately.
Oh, well saved.
but that disconnect, but it is actually kind of a nice little mini version of it. There is a huge disconnect that goes on in the midst of this massive this massive technological revolution that we're in the midst of living right now, where more people are, quote, connected, unquote, than ever before, and yet they're disconnected. That creates massive amounts of confusion, but it also really undermines things such as the nurturing, such as the elements of the relationship.
Absolutely.
Because where are you going to learn the skill?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's done such a disservice to relationships, right? That's really, you know, if you were to ask, like, what's the number one thing that people come in, you know, it's like, sure, they might come in saying like, we have conflict all the time, we have communication issues, but really underlying is there's something missing in the connection between them that they want to get back, right? Whether it's, you know, intimacy, emotional connection, sexual connection, just being present, like the skill of being present with each other. I mean, that's one thing that technology has completely, like, you know, I mean, even, and it's not been, again, it's happened so quickly.
Yes.
Right. When I was in college, like, you know, we could sit around and not do anything with each other. And now you know, just see teenagers and everybody's sitting around and everybody's on their phone.
Right.
You know, so it's like being together, but not connected. Like even, I could go on about this.
So what do you actually do around here?
Oh man.
We had a guest on a few weeks back. It was a young couple. He was 30, she was 26. And I don't remember exactly what their thing was, but they specifically talked about how they had a special weekend where they invited friends, but also people they didn't know to all gather in one place. And they all agreed they were going to put their phones away for a weekend. And they described it as the most amazing experience they'd ever had. And all I thought of two things. The first thing that I thought of was, well, yeah, it is amazing. And how interesting that it's so rare.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean 30 years ago, there was nothing rare about it. Now, all of a sudden, it's almost non-existent. That's a major shift.
Yeah. And it's a real shame because, you know, your brain does change as well when it's constantly being stimulated. So it's like cultivating that skill of being present and connected is like, it's a muscle that people are having to retrain or train for the first time. Is like, how do I just be present without needing constant stimulation?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's a big part of it too, isn't it? The phone, particularly. That's like the symbol of what we're talking about here. The phone is a stimulator. What amazes me is that it is such a stimulator because, quite honestly, I find my phone to be very unstimulating. Now, maybe that's just because of my generation. I'm not sure, but the more I interact with it, I mean, I'm not tech phobic or anything. My background was in IT, so that's not really an issue for me. It's more like, really, you want to spend that much time on it? I get the little notification saying your screen time was down. I said, I'm amazed it was that high. I couldn't believe it was that high. You're telling me it's down? Like it's a bad thing? I don't understand.
Yeah.
But I think going to what you say, it kind of hits a need for some people who are missing something. If they're missing connection, then they can maybe get that on their phones. And
well, that's what they hope for anyway.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's quite addictive, isn't it? You don't want to be missing out on something. So that's kind of how it kind of grabs you, I would imagine.
Yes. And I also think that's what's happened to online dating and why it's also become so hard to date online is because, you know, there's sometimes this sense, and again, you know, I'm a married person at this point, but, you know, talking to my clients and talking to even, you know, like dating in Austin, it's like, it's almost this idea that there's going to be somebody better if I just like keep swiping, right? And so it's like the urge to seek connection, right? The urge of like, I want a partner leads you to the dating app, but then the like, let me just keep. So it becomes that kind of paradox of like the urge for deeper connection is there, but maybe the skills for actually cultivating a real connection aren't. So it becomes this like really frustrating cycle for a lot of people, right? They might be like, I have, it's a whole thing. Kind of the paradox of, social media too. It's like, I have, 50,000 friends on social media, but I have no one who I can call to take me to the airport. I have no one who I can call when I'm sick, who would bring me, soup. So it is this kind of,
Which raises a question. Well, what is a friend at that point? I mean, the word friend has been co-opted to mean this other thing. What we used to mean by it, it no longer means that. So what is that? What's the label that we now use to describe what a friend used to be back before social media came along? I don't know what the word is anymore. I mean, is there one? Anne-Marie, can you think of one? I can't think of one.
No, I mean, I would just still say friend, but I think you're right. It has been slightly diluted, where previously it would be it's an acquaintance. People say that's a friend. Yeah. So I think it's the same word. I just think it's been diluted.
Yeah, it's been diluted. That's a good way of describing it.
Yeah. Because really on social media, what they are is followers, right? It's like, and especially for the younger generation, like the, Gen Z, I've seen that it's really about like cultivating a brand and cultivating a following more than it is about cultivating friendships, which, again, as human beings, we all need to have genuine, connective, supportive networks of people who are our actual friends, who know us, not just the image of us. And
I think you've you put your finger on it, because what I think has ultimately happened is this model of having followers and being a brand and so forth is what people are trying to use to replace having a real connection. And of course, it's not really suited for that.
Yeah.
So that's ultimately going to lead to all kinds of problems. It's going to keep you busy. I mean, as a therapist, you're going to have lots of work out of that, but that's not necessarily the good thing that we're looking for here.
No. Yeah. And that's part of the reason I wrote this book and try to put it out there is like, there's nothing, I mean, and like you were saying about this couple that came on and they talked about like having this experience where they were just able to be present. Like connection is such a core human need. It's so powerful. And then also, the experience of being seen, being loved, caring for someone, loving someone, and having that be reciprocated. I mean, these are powerful, these are what poems and stories are written about, right? These are what songs, this is what like the kind of the generative power of human connection is incredible. And so, this is also why I'm not thrilled about having a constant stream. I mean, like I'll be busy, but, at the same time, as a human, as somebody who has experienced falling in love, staying in love, cultivating a healthy relationship, I'm like, man, it's such a beautiful, powerful experience. And I wish everybody could have that all the time, So, just being able to try to share like things that are helpful for others, sharing also the hope that like relationship skills are different than just being a good person. So if you're like, I'm a good person, I'm discouraged that I'm not, being successful in relationships. It's like, hey, look, there's still hope because these are skills that you can learn on top of being a good person. Like, And so anyway, that's why I'm so passionate about this.
And the passion's coming through. I like that. That's really good.
Yeah.
But also they're transferable skills that will set people in their work relationships, their friendships, their family relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And that's also where for men specifically, there's a whole men's loneliness epidemic, men not having a lot of close friendships. Often when men are, when they go through divorce, they lose their entire social network. And they become very isolated. And so that was also something is like, look, even if you're not in a romantic relationship, cultivating deeper friendships, cultivating better relationships with your children, cultivating, healthier work relationships so that you actually are a little bit more connected or in your community, again, trying to have these transferable skills, like like you said. And, sure, if you end up meeting a romantic partner, fantastic. But again, life is more than just being in a romantic partnership. Like being connected in your community is so crucial. Having friends that, you can hang out with and really be honest with about what you're going through. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that's really life-saving, I
was also realizing just now that one of the, I guess I would call it a casualty. One of the casualties of the current trend, the technological trend of connection, is the loss of how do I want to phrase this? I'm trying to not fall back into old ways of expressing things because those words don't work anymore. What are the new ways to talk about this? That's the hard part. Trying to figure out what the ways of describing are, what the words are to describe it. I know how I'll do it. I'll do it this way. One of the common themes that plays out a lot today is that relationships are no longer about how long they are, but rather whether you have any. It's whether or not a relationship sustains is not really considered a big part of this global technological picture. It's more, have you had relationships? Let's address that for a moment. First of all, just from the perspective of a therapist, what do you think about that? But also, how do you see that play out? I'm trying not to lead this too far.
Yeah, I think there's something also really healthy. I mean, part of what I do as a therapist is, come into people's lives for a short period of time, have hopefully a meaningful experience with that person, or, over a period of, months or years or whatever. But eventually the goal is not dependence on the therapeutic relationship. It's then, termination. So I think that's what comes up for me with when you say like, and then I've seen people that have been in relationships for decades and the relationship is terrible. It's not fulfilling. It's super unhealthy. And it's not leading to a better quality of life. And so, on one hand, I can see that, maybe there's like an acquisition aspect of, getting multiple relationships as opposed to kind of just like being happy and investing in the one that you're in. But then there's also the opposite of like, accepting that not every relationship has to last your whole life for it to be meaningful and for it to be really fulfilling, and that there is something really healthy about a respectful end. I do work with couples as well on conscious uncoupling, collaborative divorce. And that can also be something, that can be a beautiful, like, part of a relationship skill as well, right? How do we realize that maybe we're better as co-parents, maybe we're better as friends? And that's also kind of can be a very loving thing to do, is say like, I see that you're, wanting more out of your life and you have passions that you want to, pursue, or, and I don't see myself on that journey with you, and I wish you all the best, and I release you, to your next chapter. And that can also be really lovely and beautiful, So
I think it's fair to say then that there are some detriments that we've identified with the modern scene, but there are also some positives that come out of it, because old ideas about what a relationship has to be, those are kind of falling by the wayside.
Yeah. Which, again, I think it can be, I think it's very freeing, that at the end of the day, you get to live the life that is authentic to you. And whether that means that you marry the first person and have a relationship that lasts for the rest of your life, marry the first person you date and, go with that person until the end. Or if you end up having a different story, having one that's authentic to you is really important.
And not just authentic to you, it's also authentic to your family. That's one of the themes that has really grown up, I think, over particularly the last 30 years, has been what used to be defined as, quote, the family, unquote, is no longer thought of in the same terms. So certainly whatever the primary relationship is that formed that family is going to have a direct impact on that. And the fact that we're talking about relationships that evolve and even come to an end, if it's happening in ways that are healthy, in ways that are supportive of the individuals involved, then we have a new dynamic. We have a new way of understanding how relationships work.
Yeah. No, I love the way that you clarified that, because that is something that is also really important is, just let's say if a romantic relationship between the two adults ends, then maybe it shifts into a co-parenting relationship where the focus is still how can we show up for our children? How can we nurture a collaborative environment so that regardless, our kids have a solid relationship with both of us, mutual respect, and everybody's united around, what is healthy for all of us to thrive.
I've been doing a little bit of dating, and I was out with somebody recently who made an interesting comment. She said, dating today, particularly when you're older like we are, you've been through a marriage, you come out the other side with either a divorce or a widow or whatever. And what you realize is that you're not just trying to get to know that person, you're also trying to get to know that person in the context of who their previous relationship was. In other words, you're not just engaging with one person, you're engaging with a pre-existing structure of people.
Yeah, that I can also speak to that. My husband was married previously, and so when I met him, he had a 4-year-old that he was co-parenting with his ex, and so that is something I'm also very cognizant of like, when I started dating him, I also had to, put him in context of he is a father who has a daughter who he has, like as primary core in his life. And, where do I, as a bonus parent, as, his girlfriend and then wife, like, how do I fit into this pre-existing dynamic? And yeah, like you said, I think a lot more people are in that state, right, of like dating somebody who has had previous relationships, maybe even children from previous relationships, and trying to figure out how to have a new dynamic. Yeah.
And once again, there's no manual. There was no manual before, and there's still no manual. Well, but there is actually one. It's called Strong, but I'm not even sure it goes that far.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, this is a field guide, which, I'm like, these are the things to look for. These are the things to avoid. But also, there's, being invested in your own health will really lead you to what you're hoping for, right? Like, maybe if you're going to be a step parent, you fall in love with somebody who's a parent already and you're trying to date them, like, start with maybe the basics of safety, trust, respect, openness, nurturing, and generosity, but then also, find your way into, well, what does it mean to be a good step parent, or, how to love somebody, while they, I don't know, like, there's lots of stuff out there. So, yeah.
But I'm just thinking about your safety thing. Even in that situation, there would be the safety for the ex-partner, because they want to know that you're looking after their child, and the safety of that child to know that you're a stranger coming into their world, and they've got to feel. So there's a lot of safety everywhere in these situations, isn't there?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the 4 kind of aspects of safety that I break down is the number 1, self-awareness. Right. So like, are you ready to be dating, at this level? Are you looking for companionship, or are you looking for partnership? And if so, are you invested? Are you willing to put in the work of investing into a partnership? Right. Which, again, there's nothing wrong with just dating for companionship, but make sure you're clear on what you're looking for. Right.
Yeah.
Self-awareness also of what traumas are you maybe still dealing with or healing from? Just kind of understanding what you're bringing to the table. And then the second part of safety is stability, right? So like you said, like, how do I help provide a stable home for my partner and his child? And, how can I contribute to the stability rather than being a liability, right? Which again, kind of goes back to that, if you've got a drinking problem, you got an anger problem, you got a problem, like you get in a fight every job you're in, like you can't have basic stability in your life. You're going to bring that into a relationship, right? If you have chaos in your own self, that's just going to infect every relationship that you go into. So have some stability, have some skills there. And then the last two are the skill of self-regulation, right? Which is basic, like, if you're upset, when you're in conflict, do you know how to calm yourself? Do you know how to regulate? Which is also really important with being a parent. I think I heard kids in the background there, Anne-Marie. So, you're a parent, like, if you're upset, you cannot calm anybody else, right? Kids crying and you're angry, like it doesn't work, right? And so the skill of self-regulation, how can you be a calm presence so that you can use your nervous system to help calm and create safety for everyone in your family, right? And then the skill of self-expression, being able to articulate what it is you're feeling. Again, for men, this one is so crucial because, when men are being socialized, from a young age, talking about emotions is not one of the skills that is high up on the list to teach men, right? Or young boys. And so, but often what I see when it comes to emotional safety and connection in a heterosexual intimate relationship is the women are like, I want to be able to share my emotions. I want to, him to reciprocate, and I'm not getting anything back. Like if I'm trying to share, I get here's what you should do. I get the fixer. And I don't get that kind of person who has the capability to really hear me as I try to self-express myself. And when I ask, like, hey, is something wrong? Like, you seem off, like, what's going on with you? And I get I'm good, nothing. I'm just going to be in the garage. Again, I don't get that connection. I don't get that sense of safety because I know something's wrong, but he doesn't have the words to tell me. And so then I get all like, my danger signals start going off. Like, is he sick? Did he get laid off? Is he cheating? What's happening? And so just as a man, having that skill of self-expression to be able to say, like, got some bad news at work, feeling a little, disappointed, feeling whatever it is, I just need some space. It's not about us. I'm just, I need some time to kind of decompress and process my thoughts. I'll be right with you as soon as I get them to a place where I can talk about them.
But that's where it's a two-way thing, isn't it? That's where it's a two-way thing because
totally.
Being a woman, you need to like dig deeper then. Okay, so ask more questions, find out how they communicate, what helps them communicate, teach them to communicate if they've never done it. It's literally just the whole working together, isn't it?
Yes, and I think that's also where I've seen the women try to be the teachers in a relationship. And part of, what I'm encouraging men is like, and women too, is like when a man can say like, here's what I need. I just need you to respect what I'm asking for. And a woman can trust that, like when he says, give me a minute, he'll literally will be back. And I don't have to chase him down and be like, whoa, tell me, and dig at him. I just need to say like, okay, well, I love you. Let me know if I can get you anything. And then in 5 minutes, he does come back, or in 30 minutes, or, he does come back. That also kind of neutralizes that dynamic that I've seen sometimes where, there's like the pursuer and the distancer, where the woman is chasing and the man is, she's trying to teach and he's like, you're not my mom, get away, So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think certainly what I found with my experience is I have just one question is like, what do you need? Mm-hmm. What do you need with the kids, with my husband, whatever? What is it you need?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And isn't it lovely when somebody can actually tell you what they need? Right?
Because it's starting that whole thought process. Oh, what do I need?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And by the way, that is both directions too. I mean, what you laid out was, I would say, the more common one, the traditional one. But it also can work. I experienced it the other way around with my ex. I mean, toward the end, I couldn't get her to communicate on anything. I wanted to know what the communication was, and I couldn't get it. So it can work both directions. The thing that keeps coming to my mind, Anne-Marie, as we're talking about this, and I'm sure this has come to your mind too, but I just want to get the confirmation. Once again, we're talking about self-development. We're talking about work. In order for the relationship to work, we have to work on ourselves.
Yeah. And you do
it
that
doesn't matter
throughout
whether male or female. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you do that throughout the whole relationship because you're changing. I mean, I was certainly a different person than when I met my husband. I was half my age. I'm a different person, but I've changed and I'm going through stuff, and you just have to navigate that together. And you do that by developing yourself and developing your relationship.
Yeah, and that's why the first part of safety is that self-awareness, because you can't tell your partner what you don't know, right? So, yeah.
And you have to be willing to also communicate it too. It has to be both. You have to know it yourself, about yourself, and you have to be willing to communicate it to the other person, and then flip the role around so that they're communicating to you and you're listening to them as well. I think that's probably the biggest thing that's missing, which is really kind of odd, given what we talked about earlier about the dominance of social media and the technology and so forth. On one level, I would think that reciprocity would be pretty straightforward, because there is a reciprocity to how the technology works. It's amazing to me how rarely it actually plays out in relationships. That it's almost, not always, but it's so often, let's put it that way. It's so often one directional. And I haven't quite figured out why that happens.
Well, and I mean, I'm just here to speak on what I see and what I know, right? And that's often where I see that the lack of intentionality, that both people have to choose the relationship and not just fall into it because they think that that's what's expected, right? And that self-awareness of, I know why I'm in this relationship. I know why I'm choosing this partner. I know what my blind spots are, and I continue to work on them. And, you know, that intentionality of starting the relationship off with that often is a huge part of what sets the tone for later on.
Well, not just starting it and setting the tone, but continuing with it. I mean, it's one thing to set the tone. It's another thing to continue to stay with the tone, to keep the tone toning, to keep it ringing.
Yeah. And that's where love is just, you know, it's always a choice to keep doing it every day, right? It's like the Simon Sinek, start with why. Why are you in this relationship? Why are you with this person? Why do you keep waking up and choosing this every day? Right? If you don't know your why, you're not going to stay committed for very long.
It is truth. Very true. Unfortunately, our commitment to this particular episode is running out. So we have to find a way to draw an end to this particular relationship. This has been good. This has been really good. A couple things that we want to do before we part company. First of all, for someone who wants to work with you, how do they find you?
So I'm right now just working with people in Texas, but you can find me online at strong.love. Okay. Eventually, I'm going to be working on courses that can be used anywhere. But yeah, for now, if you want to work with me, strong.love.
Do you welcome comments from people, or not comments, but contacts from people who are asking you things
about
the area?
Absolutely. Because I have a wide, network of contacts. I always will try to, if somebody reaches out to me, I'll always try to connect them with somebody who can work with them in their area. Okay. I like being the connector. So yeah, please reach out.
Very good. The second thing that I want to do is something that's it's become something of a tradition here on the show. Because a few years ago, I noticed that you, like so many people who come onto the show, people who come onto the show are always people who are in a giving mentality. They want to help other people. They discovered something along the way. They had a crash and burn and it led to some revelation, whatever. They found something they wanted to share with somebody else. And so they not only come onto this program, but they go on to other programs and they write blogs and they do social media posts and they write books and they put out courses, all toward the goal of helping other people in various ways they want to help them. One of the casualties maybe that comes along with that is there's a lot of free content that gets put out there that they never hear what happened with it. So you came onto this program and you reached a bunch of listeners and many of them you'll never even know what the impact was on them, or they took some idea away and it turned it into something. You never know about that, and you certainly never get thanked for it. And that's why I said, whoa, wait a minute, we can do something about that. So on behalf of those people you've never met, never seen, never will meet, never will see, impacting them, helping them in different ways that you didn't even know about, on their behalf, thank you for what you've been doing, because you're making a difference in this world.
Thank you. That's lovely. I appreciate hearing that.
Yeah. Because we don't
you.
recognize that, and we need to.
Yeah. And I'm sure you as well. Like, this is a lovely thing that you're doing. And at the beginning you were talking about, just daily dose of happy and spreading happiness. This is, we all can use a little bit more of that in our lives.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh yes. There isn't enough of it. We need more, as much as we can get.
More the better.
And then the last thing we like to do with every episode, or that I like to do, I'm not sure how much Anne Marie likes it, but I love it. I love putting her on the spot and asking her to kind of summarize how the whole thing ties together and tell me what the one takeaway is that stands out to her more than anything else. So this is my kind of drawn out way of giving her a chance to think about it. But Anne Marie, now that you've thought about it for a moment, what's your one thing that you're pulling out of this conversation today?
This one's an easy one because it kind of stood out at me at the very, very beginning. When Chris was saying that, think about what you want in a relationship. I think so often people say, oh, he's really good looking, she's really pretty, and you have that attraction, but actually thinking about what you want from a relationship, what your expectations are, and then sharing that and voicing that and working together. I just thought that was perfect, because we don't always do that, but we wouldn't go for a job that we didn't investigate and know was suitable. And there's so many other aspects of life, but this is sharing your time, which is very precious. So I just thought that was spot on.
I love that. Yeah. See, that's why I do this, Kristal, because I get great answers like that one.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah.
So thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for what you're doing. Yeah, and keep up the good work. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
Our pleasure.
Mutually felt. And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.